go.
It's not as good. Okay, let's change that back. There we go. Okay, great.
All right, we should be live any minute now, or any second now, rather.
Terrific.
Hey, look at that.
Yay. Good. Are we live?
We are officially live on YouTube.
Cool. Cool. Hello, guys. Hello, everyone. Hello, Mr. Sci-Fi fans. It's Marc, Zicree, Mr. Sci-Fi here doing a live feed to answer your questions, concerns, life problems, whatever, whatever you'd like. And we'll see where it leads. It's going to be an interesting conversation.
Great. And I am, as always, your fearless mediator.
Yes.
I'll be asking Marc your questions as you write them. And of course, there's always the super chat. So if there's a bunch of questions and you want yours asked before all of them, throw a little money our way to Mr. Sci-Fi, and your quote, your question will go right to the top.
Great. Terrific.
And so we have William Jackson listening and says hi.
Okay. Hi, William. How are you doing? It's another sunny day here in California, just working on Space Command, working on the Kickstarter campaign, going over the new book I've written, and making my notations before I send it to my publisher. So life is good. No problems.
While we're waiting for questions, go ahead. Why don't you talk about that book?
Yes. Well, the book is called Greenlighting Yourself, and it's going to be published by Silman James, my publisher on the Twilight Zone Companion. And it basically is, if you want a career as a writer, director, actor, producer, it's how you can make stuff happen, just like I have with Mr. Sci-Fi and Space Command and all of that. It's, it's everything. It's like, getting started, getting clear on what you want to accomplish, working with famous people, getting mentors, raising money, getting an agent and manager. It's all the things you need to know. And it's, recovering from failure, building on success. So it's drawn from, and, from my experience, but also those of my friends, including J.J. Abrams, Guillermo del Toro, Neil Gaiman, where they give stories from their lives, Ray Bradbury, that are illustrating how they dealt with those things and built their careers. So it's a really cool book. I'm glad I've written it, and I'm also glad that I address a lot of stuff that's not addressed in other how-to books on how to have a career in the arts. So it's neat. I'm pleased with it. So I'm just reading through, and as soon as I've finished reading through, I'll ship it. And then meantime, of course, we've got the Kickstarter campaign going on Space Command, and we've just put out the first hour that people can watch on Mr. Sci-Fi, but also I'm about to release a sneak peek, the first 10 minutes of the second hour, and that's going to be super, super, super fun. So so keep an eye out for that. And so
our VFX team is working nonstop on getting those. One of our team members just dumped 42 different shots, a huge chunk of shots.
Yeah, and it's been amazing training those squirrels to do visual effects shots. I mean, most people think it only humans can do them, but when you get a huge legion of squirrels all working together toward a single goal, it's phenomenal what can happen. So, but yes, but we have our VFX people here in Germany, in Chile, all around the world, and so it's great. It's great to be able to use the modern technologies.
Yeah. And we have our first question now.
Please.
From Mo Montgomery.
Hello, Mo.
Who asks, have you thought about filming in Canada to save money?
Yes, and I've also been a producer on many shows that were shot in Canada, and a story editor as well, such as Friday the 13th, the series, and Beyond Reality, a number of others. I think Tech War was shot there too. And yes, it does bring benefits. The reason I have my studio down here in LA for now is that with my friends who are actors, they always end up shooting away from home. So whether it's Christina Moses going up to, I guess, Toronto or Vancouver, or Doug Jones going up there, when they come home, they're so relieved to be home and able to sleep in their own beds. I can say, well, if you can spare a day or two to come to the studio, we can grab some stuff. We can shoot some things. And that's a huge advantage for them, because they don't have to get on an airplane. They don't have to be away from their loved ones. So that's why I have it here. As we build out from that, I mean, we have one project in England right now. We're talking about doing a project in Italy. So yes, I definitely, our company is now based, our production company is now based here and in the UK, and definitely Canada makes a lot of sense too. So there you go.
Great.
In fact, one of our people that we were just having a conference call with is up in Saskatchewan, one of our team, and he's a very valued member. So Todd Chamberlain. So and his wonderful daughter Elizabeth, who is in Space Command. She plays Brian McClure's daughter. So there you go. It's really fun.
You can see her in Ripple Effect, which is
the bonus episode we did, the 2-hour episode we did during the pandemic with the actors for the most part shooting their own scenes, and it was a lot of fun pulling that together.
As you can see, we're each wearing our Space Command pins.
Yes, and for those of you who are science fiction fans, I'm also wearing my Wayland Yutani shirt, which is the company in James Cameron's Aliens. So
now that shirt isn't available on our Kickstarter, but the pins are.
Yes.
And exclusive just for you guys who are watching right now, we are in the process of talking about adding a brand new shirt to the Kickstarter. So look for that coming soon.
Yeah, it's going to be great. And of course, all of this is toward getting the Blu-ray of the first 2 hours of Space Command done and shipped. The DVDs, Blu-rays, there's tons of cool extras in this, including audio commentaries, behind the scenes stuff, you name it. And so we can't wait to send it to you. So definitely going to Kickstarter, spacecommandkickstarter.com is a great idea. Every dollar helps, and every $1,000 helps even more. So
and every $10,000 helps even more.
$1 million, yes, absolutely. And but again, the good part is we're doing it for the love of it. So anyone who helps us is part of our family and our Space Command family, and it's much appreciated. One of the things I'm working on now, by the way, is the Captain Jack Kemmer action figure and the Mr. Sci-Fi action figure. In fact, I can show you a bit of a prototype. Hold on a second, guys. Okay.
We've got more questions when you're ready.
Yeah, these are not being offered yet, but the Mr. Sci-Fi action figure and the Captain Kemmer action figure. And you can dress me up in whatever outfit you want, be it Batman or Barbie's dream house, whatever you'd like. And I can have fights with, the alien and, Predator or whomever. So there you go.
Or your dog.
Dog can eat me.
Yeah. So be careful.
Interesting journey. So
our next question, we have another question from Mo Montgomery.
Hi, Mo.
Who says, who was cast as the Prophet? Because we had our worldwide talent search.
We've gotten over 1,000 auditions in, and so we're winnowing them down now. Elaine's been looking at a number of them, as have the rest of our team. We'll announce that in the very near future. I mean, the finishing the new book and dealing with this campaign has taken some of my bandwidth, frankly. But definitely we're gonna announce that very, very soon. And Elaine tells me there's some great candidates who've been auditioning, and I look forward very much to seeing those videos. So yeah, absolutely.
Our next question is from Luke Herbert.
Hi, Luke.
Who asks, what do you think of British science fiction?
I like it very much. The Prisoner is one of my favorite shows of all time. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the radio version, I love. And, some of the Doctor Who stuff, I was a big Tom Baker fan back in the day. Haven't really gotten into the new Doctor Who simply because, who has time to watch all of those episodes? But I'm very familiar with, the earlier Doctor Who episodes and so forth. And I mean, I just, it's on a case-by-case basis of what I like. Haven't gotten into Red Dwarf or Blake 7 yet, simply again because try and balance your time and actually have a life in between viewing. And but it's I love British science fiction. In fact, Elaine and I went to Port Marion where The Prisoner was shot and had a lovely time there. It was just magical. So yeah, I think the Brits, and there's a lot of great British science fiction writers for that matter, whether it's Brian Aldiss or John Wyndham or I just read a book by John Christopher that I liked very much, and of course H.G. Wells is the grandfather of us all. Yeah. So is there another question, Adam? Anything else?
Our next question is from Bruce Moore, coming from Kentucky.
Great. Hi, Bruce.
He asks, or he says, I'm really excited about your new book, Greenlighting Yourself. Will you be offering autographed copies when it comes out?
Sure, you bet, absolutely. And I'm also going to probably do an audio book of it, just because I think that would be fun, and it's because there's a lot of this is really written in my voice, so it's not dry, and academic. It's very much me talking the way I talk to you on Mr. Sci-Fi or anywhere. It's I talk about everything that's related to how to use your day effectively. Like when you wake up and you're just working for yourself as an artist or writer or whatever, how do you just not binge TV all day and get nothing done? And so I talk about how one can actually have a schedule. And Ray Bradbury taught me about this, and Guillermo del Toro, and so forth. And so there's all sorts of I think you're gonna love it. I'm very pleased with it. So and then we'll see what happens after that. So but it was funny because I taught a class that was called Greenlighting Yourself, and then it occurred to me to see if there was a book of that title, and I typed in Amazon and so forth, and no one had written a book called Greenlighting Yourself. So I just emailed a couple publishers and saying, would you like a book called Greenlighting Yourself? And my editor at Silman James said, you bet. And we were off to the races. So
it's a really great title, and it's very pertinent in today's.
And actually, it has a subtitle: Greenlighting Yourself, Living Your Hollywood Dream. So that's the point, because so many people wait for the studios or the networks or the publishers to wave their magic wand and make it all happen. But now, thanks to the internet, thanks to editing on a Mac, thanks to all of us having video cameras in our pockets, there's really no reason to wait at all. And the fact that I can make Space Command without a studio or network to this point, is testament to what's possible. And so I really want to give people the tools where they can be the catalysts in their own life. That's, I think, very important.
Right. Part of which it inspired me to start my own podcast, Inside Animation, which, shameless plug. But I interviewed you for that. You were my guest, which that episode is coming out next Monday.
Yes, that's great. That's fun. And, it's funny because a lot of people know about my career, but some people don't. And, they might know me from the Twilight Zone Companion or for the Star Trek or DS9 or any of the things, Babylon 5. But I also had a very active career writing animation when I was just out of college. So while I was writing the Twilight Zone Companion, so I wrote, for tons and tons of shows. And, the big ones like He-Man and Smurfs and Real Ghostbusters and Super Friends, but also like lesser known ones like Biscuits and the Littles and Puppy's Further Adventures and
Black Star.
Black Star, which I loved. That was so much fun. Michael Reeves, I think, and I wrote, all of them. And, so again, and the animated Incredible Hulk, and on. Every now and then I'll go through my files and I'll come across a script or an outline or something and think, God, I didn't know I wrote for that. It's like I came upon an outline for a Care Bears movie recently. It's like, Care Bears?
Wow.
Okay. And Captain EO, Michael Reeves and I outlined a whole Captain EO animated film. So that was pretty amazing. Captain EO was a character that Michael Jackson played in an attraction at Disneyland. So
next question from William Jackson. We were just talking about your Greenlighting Yourself book.
Yes.
And you said you were thinking about an audio version. What platform is that you think that's going to be?
Audible. Yeah. My audio publisher has always been Blackstone, and also Skyboat Media put out the Magic Time audio play, but it's all available on Audible. And it's sort of like, well, if I can just put it up on Audible, why do I need a middleman? It doesn't really make sense. So I'll probably just record it and put it there. But I have to have a conversation with my publisher first to make sure that she's copacetic with that. I'm sure she will be. And, it'll be fun.
Great. New question from Gregory Krug, which you've answered before in previous iterations.
Fine, that's fine.
But for our new listeners who haven't heard it yet, if you could instantly know another language in addition to English, which one would you pick and why?
Yeah, and my initially I would say Spanish, simply because I live in Southern California and it would come in incredibly handy. But there's a number of languages I'd love to know. I'd love to know Italian. I'd love to know. I have a little bit of French. I took Yiddish for a year at UCLA because that's my family's language before me. My grandfather, on my mom's side, my grandfather and my grandmother, Yiddish was their first language, and my mom understood Yiddish but didn't really speak it because children were meant to be seen and not heard. But but I'd love to know Russian. Chinese could come in handy. I mean, if I could, basically know all languages and just be able to go into the jungle and talk to, pygmies or whatever,
Or just have a universal translator like in Star Trek.
Yeah. And it's all the whole universal translator thing has always been very odd to me, because there they are talking to Klingons and talking to Vulcans and all these people who ostensibly have their own languages, but then they're talking in their own languages to each other, and yet I'm uncertain how the universal translator works exactly. It's like, doesn't it translate when they're talking in Vulcan to each other, or it's always been a little bit funky. But yes, absolutely, I'd love that.
Great. So I know you recently talked about how you've been to England. You've visited there.
Yes.
Anne Daly wants to know: have you visited Ireland on your travels?
Yes, and Elaine and I went there some years ago. I love Ireland, and we basically rented a car and drove along the east coast, then down along the island, and then up along the west coast, and or vice versa. I guess it was west to east. We ended up in Dublin, and the people are incredibly charming, they have the gift of gab, as everyone knows, but what that translated into is great storytellers, very witty, very fun, very charming. It was interesting because the Dublin was my least favorite place in Ireland. I loved everything else much better, because Dublin was kind of more of a city. But one of the things I did was, my friend Ray Bradbury, he wrote the movie Moby Dick for John Huston, and John Huston at the time was living in Ireland because he was avoiding the American blacklist, and so Ray went to Ireland to write Moby Dick with John Huston, the script, and then John Huston shot a lot of it in Ireland, and so there's a pub there called the Moby Dick Pub, and it served as the inn in the movie. So I went there, and the owner of the pub, who was also the bartender that night, his father had been there when they shot the movie in 1953, and he pulled down his scrapbook with all the photos from the shooting and the articles and all that. It was just great. It was just great, and I brought Ray a little pamphlet from that pub back when I came back home, and because Ray and I were very dear friends, and just great, just wonderful. So it's like you can seek out these amazing places, but I'd love to go back to Ireland, and it was just a great place, great people.
Wonderful. Getting back to languages, Luke Herbert asks, in 1,000 years' time, what language do you think we will all be speaking?
Yeah, I think we'll still have different languages, but they'll be evolved from what we speak now, just as Elizabethan English or the Canterbury Tales is a different form of English than we have now. I think it's just going to continue, because language is always evolving, and it's fascinating. There's a great podcast I listened to a while ago, which was just the story of English, and it started with all these different groups that had invaded England, the Normans and so forth, and how words from those languages came into English. Like, for instance, because the French invaded, the aristocrats had their words for food, and the farm folk, the lower class English people, had words for animals, which is why you call it a cow and they call the meat beef, and so forth, because a lot of these animals, there was two different languages and words that related to those animals. So it's fascinating how that worked, and lots of stuff from the Roman, of course. Latin figures a lot in English, and Greek, of course, and I'm fascinated by all that stuff. So yes, I don't think we're ever going to have one language. It's not going to be Esperanto, that's for sure. But it's very funny. Esperanto, for those who don't know, Esperanto was a language that was invented to be a language that everyone around the world could speak. It was made up of a bunch of different languages, and there were fans of it, and people who spoke it. Forrest Ackerman spoke it, other people. It was very popular in science fiction circles. And so the producer of Leslie Stevens, the producer of Outer Limits, the original Outer Limits back in '63, decided to make a feature film And he decided that he wanted it to be able to be understood around the world, so he made it in Esperanto, which none of the actors spoke, and the movie just died. I mean, it's an amazing film to watch. It stars William Shatner speaking Esperanto, and it's very funny because they wanted to have a scene where Shatner's character encounters, or some of the other characters encounter the devil in a church, but they knew that because I think it was the devil as a goat raping a woman or something insane, and they knew they could never get the priest at this church to agree to let them use it as a location, given what was actually in the script. So what Leslie Stevens did was he wrote an entirely different script just to get it approved by the church, because he knew that the actors would be speaking Esperanto, and the priest would have no way of knowing what they were actually saying. So it's a pretty phenomenal film. You can look it up, and the cinematography is astonishing, but the film is absolutely out of its mind. And so I recommend it for that quality.
Great. Our next question is from Mountains of Elysium, or
Great.
Mo for short.
Our second Mo.
Our second Mo. Mountains of Elysium says, I've just begun to write badly, but I don't mind as long as I learn.
Great.
How much is too much world building before I start?
It's a good question. Science fiction, of course, has a lot more world building than, something like a mainstream novel, because if you're writing something set in New York, people know what that means. You don't have to explain what a skyscraper is. But in science fiction, depending on what genre of science fiction you're in, you don't, like, for instance, Space Command, because it's set in that sort of space opera world, there are a lot of things I don't have to explain because everyone knows about, what planets are in the solar system and so forth. But world building can often overwhelm a book or a script. You have to make sure that the characters are vivid and alive and real. The characters have to take center stage. And so if the characters are drab or thin or cliche, it's not going to work. And so I would urge you to read someone like Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. I'm reading his new book now, Hail Mary, which is very entertaining, because his science is solid, but he's also funny, very funny and very clever, and not to a fault, but it gives him a distinctive writerly voice, authorial voice. And but it always has to be about the characters, whatever genre you're writing, whether it's westerns or mainstream or a musical. You always have to get the audience engaged in who the people are and believing those people. And it was very interesting with Star Trek. One thing that set the original Star Trek apart was they didn't explain anything. They just dropped you in the middle of their universe. So when you watch the first episode of Star Trek, they're using the phasers, they're flying in their starship. You kind of have to catch up to how everything works, but they just assumed you would. And so they never said, well, this is what a dilithium crystal is, and this is what it does. There was never, which was great for those of us who are science fiction fans, because it was so exciting to just be dropped into that world. It was so magical and so enthralling. I mean, it was just, in a sense, I never came out of there. So, yeah.
Or with say like Magic Time,
yes.
you learn about it's a new world instantly.
Yes.
And you learn about it through the characters learning about it.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Magic Time is a trilogy of novels I wrote based on a pilot that Elena and I wrote that we're going to be doing as part of the Showrunners Network. When we're shooting it, we recorded the audio play not long ago with Armin Shimmerman and Christina Moses. The thing with that was, yes, I was creating a world where all the machines in the world stop running and magic comes back, and certain people start turning into creatures. And so in that case, I made it 3 dominant kinds of creatures: dragons, creatures I call grunters, who are sort of like little Morlock kind of creatures who run in packs and hide in the dark, and what I called flares, which were sort of fairy-like creatures that glow and are weightless and have a lot of power, but they're very delicate and fragile looking. And so again, when we talk about world building, you limit it. So you don't make too much, you don't throw too much at the audience. So, but the other part of it is you have to come up with an explanation of why this has happened and how it has happened and what the rules are. The rules, anytime you're world building in fantasy or horror or science fiction, you must be clear on what the rules are. It can never be anything goes, because the audience will just bail. Because if you don't, we've all seen movies and TV shows and even books like this where you don't know what the rules are, and it seems like they can just kind of make them up as they go along, and it's just really frustrating in that way. Richard Matheson told me when I wrote the Twilight Zone book that with Twilight Zone, the secret was you take one fantasy notion, one drop of fantasy, and you drop it into another otherwise absolutely realistic story. And he said it's not two, it's one, and that's a very good rule to go by. Now that isn't across the board. I mean, something like Field of Dreams has several fantasy constructs in it, and it still works, but you have to be engaged in those people's lives, and that's what keeps it alive as a story.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to another question from Luke Herbert.
Hi, Luke.
Who asked, what did you think of your time in his home country of Wales?
Well, I loved Wales, of course, and it's like it's just I love the British Isles entirely, Scotland, everything. I mean, it's just a great place. The people are wonderful. I love we've been to Wales a number of times because we were guests at the Cardiff International Film Festival. I got the Life Achievement Award. That thing with the gold mask was from that festival. So we've been in Cardiff, and our partners on the Lord Peter Hayne project are Welsh. Their company's based in Wales, and staying in Port Merion was just great. And then there's a town called Hay-on-Wye, which I think is in Wales, and it's a bookstore town. The entire town is used bookstores, and I just love that place. And in fact, let's see, I think, yeah, this is one of the books I got in Hay-on-Wye. This is the British paperback edition of Starship Troopers, and that's just such a great cover, but so yeah, absolutely. I love everything about it. So
wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to go back.
Let's go to, here we go. Arkansas Big Dog Hensley is back, and he asks, is there anything in Space Command for an old, overweight, crippled man that lives in the woods and seldom goes anywhere?
Yeah, well, that sounds great. Yes, absolutely. Glad you asked that. There's a number of opportunities that could be had your way. We have long distance cameos where basically we'll put you on a view screen. We'll create like a line for you to say or something. There's that. There's also, of course, a ton of Space Command stuff you can get. Downloadable stuff and T-shirts. Like this if it's at Space Command, and tons of things. Also, if you ever want to come to LA, there's our studio when we're shooting, and that's great fun, of course. And but I mean, again, it's like the whole idea of Space Command is that we welcome everybody one way or another, and that's true of science fiction too at its best. It's a big tent, as I often say, and we're all kind of a family, and joined by our mutual regard for each other. And I think compassion, kindness, all of those things are super important in the world. And I love the fact that science fiction welcomes oddballs, and I think that's terrific. It's interesting. On Saturday Night Live, Elon Musk, who hosted it last weekend, mentioned that he has Asperger's, which he had never revealed until being on Saturday Night Live. He mentioned he was the first host with Asperger's, or at least first host to say he has Asperger's.
Right.
And but the point is that many of our most brilliant people, our most wonderful people, have oddities and eccentricities and all sorts of stuff, dyslexia, whatever. And science fiction says the more the merrier, and I love that about science fiction and about Star Trek and all of these different wonderful worlds. So absolutely, there's definitely room for you. And I mean, and some people like to make spacesuits or ray guns or other gigas, and we welcome all that stuff too. I mean, posters for Space Command. I'm going to have a poster contest soon. I'm going to have another spacesuit contest because I loved that. And we'll see. I've got a NASA astronaut that I've been talking to about being one of the judges in the spacesuit contest, and that could be absolutely cool. And so it just keeps going. Yeah, absolutely. You bet. Send me an email and we can talk about it. So yes. So go ahead, Adam.
Let's see. We've got so Mountains of Elysium mentioned that Jonathan Frakes did a movie in Esperanto, and Motorcycle Hiker wants to know what the film is called. Do you know that?
Well, I don't know that one. I'm surprised there is more than one movie in Esperanto.
Yeah.
Given I keep trying to remember the name of the Shatner one. It was like because he'd also did The Intruder, which was a different film, but it had another I title. You know, I just can't recall off the top of my head. And it went under various names. But no, I don't know the one with Frakes. I do know the one with Shatner. But and again, this is Shatner before Star Trek. I mean, this is, you know, this is sort of just between his appearing in Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, and just before he did Star Trek. So, but it's well worth checking out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No new questions right now, but we can talk about all the wonderful new add-ons that were just now added to Kickstarter just yesterday and early today.
Yeah, go for it. You bet.
There's
and again, for those who are joining us now, there's a Kickstarter campaign going on to finish, you know, all the post-production on the second hour of our pilot, and also shoot the next hour that we're going to be shooting, and so forth. So if you haven't gone to our Kickstarter campaign, it's spacecommandkickstarter.com. It really helps us. The money goes to where it needs to go and does what it needs to do, and we really are grateful. So go ahead, Adam, please.
Yes. We've just added, so Kickstarter has a new thing called add-ons, where you can, when you get a perk level, and then you can add extra things, you know, and it's a brilliant thing, because before we just had different perk levels and you could only choose one. So if you were a fan of Star Trek and Twilight Zone, you could get either the Star Trek bundle or the Twilight Zone bundle, but not both, or you'd have to spend a ton of money to get one that has everything in it. But now you can buy the Star Trek bundle and then add on the Twilight Zone.
Cool.
Or you can add on Marc's first book, the 3 interviews on media and society. Or we
should mention something about that, Adam, because generally people think that the Twilight Zone Companion was my first book, and it officially is. But when I was in college, when I was like 19 years old, I wrote, my first book was actually 3 interviews on media and society, in which I interviewed George Clayton Johnson, the great writer from Twilight Zone and Star Trek and Logan's Run, Ron Cobb, the brilliant designer of Alien and Aliens and Total Recall, many other things, and who was the third one? It was Theodore Sturgeon, the great Theodore Sturgeon, who had written for Star Trek and was a phenomenal writer in books and short stories. And this has never appeared anywhere. The only place you can get that book is via our Kickstarter campaign. It's not available anywhere else. In fact, there were only 2 copies in existence prior to my wonderful team scanning it and making it available. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, so you can add that specific, you don't have to get it in a package, you can add that. That is also available in one of our new packages, the Reader's Pack, too.
Yay.
Which I'm particularly proud of, because I came up with the idea. Thinking, you know, there's still readers out there, there's still people who read, right? If you're out there and you read, give us a shout out in the chat.
Yes.
But it's $77, and you can you contribute that amount, and then you'll get let's see, there's the digital copy of the Space Command novel, which is coming out soon.
Maya Bonhoff,
by Maya Bonhoff. There's of course your short story, The Grizzled Space Jockey. That's in there. The digital Twilight Zone Companion with of the latest edition of that. So there's lots of reading material available.
Cool. Well, that's great, Adam. And we're going to be introducing also more perks as the days go on. You know,
yes.
And so even if you've pledged to the campaign or haven't yet, checking it regularly, you'll see more things available as we offer them. And so there's a lot of stuff, very fun stuff coming down the pike. There's a lot of really cool Star Trek stuff from my collection that's already available there, a crate of stuff from when I was writing for Star Trek and DS9 and so forth. And I also just discovered, and we're going to be putting this out soon, this is a folder of material from when I was a kid relating to Star Trek that I just came upon, and it's not been offered yet, but it includes just amazing things, including the Leonard Nimoy Fan Club album from 1968, And because I was a member of the Leonard Nimoy fan club when the show was on, when I was like 10 years old, and it includes this really cool photo of, let's see if I can do it.
There it is.
Of Leonard Nimoy when he was, and it says Dot because that was his recording company when he came out with his first album, is singing, or singing should probably be in quotes, but but it's an amazing. But this was mimeographed, and
yeah, I like his Bilbo.
yes. But again, this is stuff that I don't know. I don't know if you could even find it anywhere. And so we're going to make a lot of this stuff. I'll do a video shortly going through this with all the amazing things that are in here. But that's going to be offered soon as well. And again, it's stuff that you cannot get anywhere else. Nor is the Twilight Zone stuff. I mean, this is from my own collection, and so it's one thing that's fun. It's fun to be an expert on stuff, and it's fun to have worked on things that are held in high regard, because I don't mean to badmouth other shows, but there are other shows that we should badmouth, and fortunately those aren't the shows that I wrote for. I wrote for good shows for the most part, and or shows that were at least trying to be good, and I mean, there's some I don't tend to talk about often, like Tech War. I wrote some of those, and it was a good attempt. And though it's very funny, William Shatner was behind that show. It was based on a series of novels he did, and he appeared in it in a guest capacity. And so at one point, Richard Manning and Hans Beimler, who were my bosses on that show, they told me that William Shatner had watched one of my episodes and really liked it, or read the script and really liked it. So I said, well, can you ask him to send me a signed photo as Captain Kirk? So I said, sure. So one day I get an envelope, and I open it very eagerly, and inside is a signed photo from William Shatner of himself in a suit and tie. What am I going to do with this?
That's not Captain Kirk.
And it's like, oh no. So I knew that it was actually signed by him, but oh man, what a letdown. And,
well, maybe he was. It was a photo of him on the holodeck.
Probably. Probably what I should have done was taken another photo of him as Captain Kirk and cut out the uniform and pasted it onto that photo. Maybe I still will.
There you go.
Man. But again, it's just very, very fun to have been part of this world of science fiction from as long back as I can remember until now.
Right.
Really.
Well, we got some more questions, and we figured out what that movie was in Esperanto. It was called Incubus.
Yes.
Incubus.
Absolutely.
So Luke Herbert has another question. Have you thought about using 3D printed miniatures for visual effects shots in Space Command?
I'd love to use miniatures in Space Command. My friend Greg Jean built the city in Blade Runner and the ship in Close Encounters, the mothership. It's just getting the right people and the right team and having it make sense from a cost perspective. But it is something I'd very much like to do. But it takes a real skill to pull that off well. But that's something I'd very much like to do. Yeah.
And speaking of 3D printing miniatures, one of the perks available in our Kickstarter is a 3D printer file of our signature ship, the Paladin. Hey. You can get that right now.
Here's the Paladin. There it is, right there. Really,
you can get that file and print it out yourself and paint it and go hog wild. You can paint it a different color too and say, hey, this is the anti-Paladin. I don't know.
You can name it after your favorite character. You can be the Harriet Tubman or whatever. It's like so absolutely. I'm totally down with that.
Very good. Yeah, holodeck. William Jackson says holodeck was a great answer.
Yeah.
So Mike Plant wants to know, was wondering if you have any thoughts or memories about your contribution to Jerry Anderson's show Space Precinct.
Yes, I do. I grew up loving Jerry Anderson's work. I mean, I grew up with Supercar and Fireball XL5 and Stingray, all these great marionette shows he did. And then, of course, he did Space 1991 with live actors, not marionettes. And he also did a fun movie with Roy Finnis called Journey to the Far Side of the Sun that's remarkably similar to a Twilight Zone episode called The Parallel. His model work was spectacular. His shows were just really fun. And so I was invited to write for Space Precinct. And so I wrote 3 or 4 episodes for that show. And I was writing here in America, but they wanted me to story edit it. They wanted to fly me over to the UK and story edit it. I saw that the show was kind of going down the tubes. It was a great idea for a show, but the money was not being spent efficiently. And it was a very odd show. It had these animatronic heads for the aliens, but there was, you know, it was still great fun to be part of. And it kind of inspired me to create Dante's Station, which is this show that Michael Reeves and I are going to be doing about a homicide cop who relocates to a mining colony near the core of the galaxy that has various alien species, just because of the idea of a cop interacting on like a New York homicide cop interacting with alien creatures was very appealing, very fun. I love future noir. Blade Runner was one of my favorite movies. But so when I would watch Space Precinct, there's one episode I did, I can't remember the name of it. It was the first script I wrote. It was about an alien with this little girl who had psychokinetic powers. And that's my favorite of the ones I wrote. It was, I think, the best realized. But yeah, it was, to be able to have worked for Jerry Anderson, I think that may have been the last show he ever did. And I was really glad to be part of it.
Very cool. Let's see, not a question, but we have a nice little comment from Kristen Mothersbaugh, who says, how you are both doing your whole inclusive Kickstarter campaign and producing Space Command is really inspiring, and
Thanks.
Also excited to read your book when it comes out.
Yeah, me too.
Much gratitude.
I mean, the first part is that I've written this book differently than any other book I've written. Usually with the other books, I would just be writing, you know, all the time on the book and very intensively, like the third Magic Time novel. That's the only thing I did for several months. This one, I tried something new where I would write like for 30 minutes a day or an hour a day over a longer time. And that seems to have worked out very well because I had so many other things to juggle, such as Space Command. But it took a while to get into. Both Elaine and I were struggling to find the right tone and the right, you know, pace of it. And then I did. Then it clicked in. And so reading it now, I'm about 100 pages in reading it, because obviously it's one thing to write it, but then you have to sit down and actually see if it makes sense all the way through, and if you've forgotten to add something or whatever. One thing that was very gratifying to me was that when I would remember like a story that J.J. Abrams had told me, or Neil Gaiman, or Guillermo del Toro or whatever, and I would email them to just double check that I got the details right, and they'd always respond immediately. And that was very heartening and great, because I didn't obviously want to say something in print that wasn't quite, that was like close to right, but not quite right. And because, you know, you remember stories that people tell you, but it's like, okay, I don't quite have that exactly, you know. And I mentioned stories that Ray Bradbury told me, of course. And I mean, it's just, you know, I'm really glad to get it all down in print. I think it'll be of great use to people, you know, just like the Twilight Zone Companion inspired many people to become showrunners in television. You know, I mean, there's a whole generation of showrunners that read that book and loved it. You know, Matt Weiner of Mad Men, and Ron Moore and Brandon Braga of Star Trek, many others, and Mark Fergus of The Expanse. I mean, you know, it was just like the making of Star Trek had been a definitive book that shaped me when I read it when I was 13. The Twilight Zone Companion served that purpose to people who are only a few years younger than me, because the book, you know, I started writing that book when I was 21 years old. And so I wasn't much younger than the teenagers who were reading it avidly when it came out. So so many of them have become friends, you know, and I'm very gratified that something I wrote back then is still in print, is still popular, and that Twilight Zone is more popular than ever. Thank God, you know. Yeah, because when I wrote it, I just wanted to learn. I wanted to teach myself how to be a writer producer. It's a huge benefit of how the book has brought me so many blessings over the years.
Very cool. Awesome. Let's see. Another shout out to Fred Sacco, who just discovered Space Command.
Yay. Well, yeah, so go to our Kickstarter campaign, throw some money our way.
Yeah, you can get all kinds of cool stuff.
Yeah. But also, one of the things I'm going to release very, very shortly is the first 10 minutes of the next episode, because, you know, during the pandemic, when all of our actors were stuck at home under quarantine, we did a special 2-hour episode where they were able to shoot their own scenes with their own cameras. And that was sort of our gift to the fans. But we knew it would be much rougher around the edges in terms of production. And I don't want people to think that that was planned as the second episode following the first episode of the pilot. No, we shot a second episode that's very polished, very completed.
And a third one.
Third beyond that, plus the prequel audio play and graphic novel, and Grizzled Space Jockey, the short story about me. I mean, there's a whole, see, one of the things I wanted to do with Space Command is have everything be canon, because it bugged me so much that the Star Trek novels weren't canon, which means, not canon for those who don't mean, it means like the Star Trek movies and the Star Trek TV shows are canon. The story is official. That's the official story. That's like the history, the real history, like Abraham Lincoln was president during the Civil War. All the novels and comic books are not canon. So if in one of the novels Sulu, marries, a Pekingese or whatever, it's like that only is in that novel, that's the story. It doesn't go beyond that generally. So I wanted in Space Command that if you read a short story or a novel or, a graphic novel or whatever, that it gives you added pieces of the larger arc of the story. And so that's what it does. So if
an audio play.
An audio play, yes. And I'm so glad that I did that audio play, because again, we lost Mira Furlan tragically to West Nile virus a few months ago, and yet she's in the prequel and she's in the bonus episode that we did. So thank God for that. She was a brilliant, brilliant actress, a dear friend, and we get to show more of her wonderful talents in those stories.
Yeah. I just think that I think she's just with me at all times, just like she's peering over my shoulder or something, over my left shoulder.
Yes. And again, I feel so blessed, because to have worked with so many actors who I just idolize. That goes back to Star Trek, to have been able to work with, George Takei and Majel Barrett and Nichelle Nichols and, Grace Lee Whitney, to actually have them in shows that I wrote and directed and produced is so what an honor. Armin Shimmerman, all these phenomenal actors that, Doug Jones, it's just a dream come true for me. I mean, when on Sweet Haven, the new one that I'm creating with Rockney O'Bannon, where we got Veronica Cartwright and Marta Kristen from the original Lost in Space, and Barbara Bain, she's in Space Command now as well. I mean, for any fanboy, that's just great honor. So very lucky.
So we have a question from Joseph.
Yes.
Who asks, is the Twilight Zone Companion really still in print? Why is it $53 on Amazon right now?
Jesus Christ.
Thanks.
It shouldn't
get it for much cheaper on the Kickstarter.
Thank you for that question. Let's see if I can do this without destroying the model of Rod Serling. This is one of the editions. This is the second edition, but there's a new edition out that's the third edition. It's 100 pages longer. It has 500 new photos. It's got links to audio and video rarities. That's the one you want to buy. The third edition, it just came out like a year ago. And if you can't find it on Amazon, my publisher is Silman James, SILMAN-James. Okay, in fact, let's see. Here's their little logo, Silman James. They're a publisher that does a lot of books on TV and film. Silman James, there we go. And if you go onto their website, I'm sure you can order it directly. And it sure as shit won't be, pardon my language, it won't be $53. It's $15.95. $15.95. And so get that. The real shocker in terms of the Twilight Zone Companion is the hardcover edition. Let me see if I have one of those here. I think I do. I don't know where it's gotten to. But there was only one hardcover edition ever, and it came out in 1982. It was the Science Fiction Book Club edition, and those go for between $1,000 and $5,000 per copy. And so that's, I should have stocked up on those, I'll tell you. Now my favorite. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, because we have some of the perks we have on our Kickstarter right now. There's a perk level where you can get. It's called the Twilight Zone Fan or Twilight Zone Super Fan, where you get not only a digital copy of the current edition of the Twilight Zone Companion, but you also get it's called a bundle of rare Twilight Zone media. So there's this stuff that didn't make it into the book.
Yeah. Because I had many photographs and things like that were from the Twilight Zone that aren't in the book, and
like color photographs from the set. Yeah.
Yes, very, very cool stuff. And but it's just fascinating. One of my favorite things about Twilight Zone books is once I was at a convention a few years ago, and I was sitting at a table, I guess, to talk to people and with all the other luminaries, whatever. And a guy came up to me and he said, "I just wanted you to tell me if this signature was authentic," because he had been to a yard sale and he'd bought a hardcover book of stories from the Twilight Zone, for 25 cents. And he opened it up and there was Rod Serling's signature. And I said, "Yeah, that's authentic." And what I should have said is, "No, I'm sorry, Phil, it's not, but I'd be happy to buy it for 50 cents. But I did not do that because I'm an honorable person.
Yeah.
But that was really, that was probably the deal of the century. That was amazing.
Great. So let's see. We've got another question from Luke Herbert.
Hi, Luke.
If you could have worked with one dream performer, alive or dead, who would it be?
That's an interesting question. Whew. The first name that came to mind was Charles Laughton because he was a genius. I don't think he was the easiest person to work with. And if you've never heard of him, just go immediately out and watch Island of Lost Souls. He also directed one feature called Night of the Hundred that's phenomenal, spectacular. But he was like this amazing, amazing, amazing actor from like the 30s into the 60s. He's in Spartacus. That's not his greatest role, but he's good in it. Beyond that, Boris Karloff would have been great fun to work with. I mean, there's a ton of people I would have loved to work with. Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, Katharine Hepburn, you name it. I mean, they're the era of the great movie stars, the 1930s through the 1950s, I would say. They had a luster to them that you really don't get nowadays. I mean, certainly Matt Damon's a talented fellow, but when you look at some of the stars of the golden age of Hollywood, Ronald Colman was amazing. So there's there's a lot of people I would have loved to work with, but I'm so pleased to work with people like James Hong. I mean, my God, he's in Blade Runner and Big Trouble in Little China, and now he's in Space Command. You haven't seen that episode yet, but you will, and he's wonderful in it. So, and he's still around, he's still here, he's still with us. So thank God for that. But yeah, so that would have been, there are many people. I mean, there are many people I would have loved to have known, not just actors, but writers and so forth, but I'm very, very lucky to have known so many of my heroes. That's been a rare privilege.
True. And Daly says, loved Barbara Bain in Space 1999. Looking forward to seeing her again.
Yeah, and she's in Ripple Effect, which is the bonus hour, the 2-hour episode of Space Command. And she's also going to be in Sweet Haven, the new show.
She's scary in that one.
Yeah. She plays a very dark character. That was a scene Elaine wrote.
It was very well done.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Elaine. It's funny because Elaine and I write and direct and produce together, and then sometimes we do individual projects. So I'm sort of the lead dog on Space Command, and then we rewrite and polish stuff and so forth. But with Ripple Effect, we were both writing scenes for this 2-hour episode because we wanted to show some of the characters that we hadn't yet introduced in the show yet. We knew they were coming down the pike, and also revisit some of the ones we'd had before. And Elaine just had some very specific ideas for some of the characters, and it was like, yeah, go for it. And she directed Barbara in that scene, and it's just great, just really super fun. And because one thing that's fun when you do a series is the more you get into it, the more things occur to you, or things open up and expand. You start to see the world more and more and more, and the relationships between characters, and great opportunities arise. And when that happens, it's really fun, really, really fun. So yeah. I'm thrilled to have been able to work with Barbara. That's quite a joy for me.
We've got a really great question from Mountains of Elysium, or
yes.
Mo.
Hi, Mo.
How much of the characters in Space Command are yours, and how much is the actor? And how much would you change or not the character based on what the actor brings?
I usually write a character with an actor in mind. So, for instance, I wrote the role of Dornevan for Doug Jones. I wrote the role of Yusuf Sikander for Robert Picardo, and Mira's role as Dr. Von Odara. So I'm usually building it upon who I know them to be. And it comes from a genuine admiration for them as people. In addition to there's huge talents as actors. When it's something like with Ethan McDowell, where we had a worldwide talent search, or Brian McClure, then once I cast them, I start polishing it to suit how they come across. You know, I wanted an old kind of hero, an old-fashioned kind of hero, like Gary Cooper or Jimmy Stewart, or those classic heroes of the where they were straight shooters, they were honorable. You believed that they stood for something, and without it being cornball. Like Henry Fonda in Grapes of Wrath is another great example. So when I found Ethan, he was perfect because he's exactly as he seems in the performance. He's a really good guy, and and he comes from Wyoming, you know. So that kind of all American, you know, cowboy kind of thing. That's very much what I wanted. And but often I'll be shaping the character. I view them as my collaborators. So I'll never, you know, if a line doesn't work for an actor where they can't say it right, or they don't like it, we'll work together. I'm never going to force something down their throats. Now, if something is important for the story or important for something we're setting up that'll pay off later, I'll talk to them. But the specifics of the words, if they say, well, can I say it this way instead of that way? If it's the same difference, yeah, sure, of course, you know. And so you know, so yeah, but you know, I like to choose my actors and then create the role for them. It's really a joy.
Yeah, great. Our next question is from the Eye Creature.
And he really is an eye creature. That's
right?
The amazing thing.
Who fittingly asks, what is your favorite sci-fi monster from 50s B movies?
Wow. Well, obviously there's the Trollenberg Terror, which is a giant eye. You know, that's a great film, one of my favorites. The Monolith Monsters is terrific because it's giant crystals that grow big, fall over, shatter, and then grow again. There's no brain, there's no mind. It's just like, okay, that's really goofy. The mutants in This Island Earth are wonderful. And the fun thing I just learned that I didn't know beforehand is the mutants are these big heads that have these big brains, and they've got these big red eyes, and they're really creepy. And they've got these claws like lobsters, and they've got these weird torsos, and they're really scary. And they've got these big kind of creepy feet. But they wear purple pants, like the Hulk. They wear purple pants. And the reason for that is they actually built a full body suit, and the legs didn't work. And at the very last minute, they had to think, Jesus Christ, what do we do? And they said, we got that purple pair of pants over there. And it's like, well, that's going to look ridiculous. Well, I'm sorry. That's as good as it gets.
Better than being naked.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I love that. I love the creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, there's so many great monsters from monster movies. You know, it's, I mean, obviously when you get up to something like Alien, you know, I mean, that's just beyond equal. I mean, this is just probably the greatest monster ever created in any movie. But I don't know if you'd call Alien a B film. You know, it's sort of bridges the gap. But no, there's so many. I love monster movies. There's a great book by a friend of mine, which I will put in a plug for. Ugh. This is Keep Watching the Skies by my late lamented friend Bill Warren, who was the world's expert on science fiction films of the 50s. And this is the definitive book that lists all of them. He interviewed many of the people who made these films. And I also love, by the way, the Martians in George Pal's War of the Worlds with the three colored eye, you know, and King Kong, of course. King Kong is not like, you know, any other, the original King Kong. I love that too. But if you haven't read this book, if you don't have this book, you can find it on eBay and probably also on Amazon, and it is worth every single penny. And you know, so I recommend that. There we go. And yeah. So are there other questions, Adam?
Yeah. Our next question is another one from Bruce Moore of Kentucky.
Great.
He wants to know, can you tell us more about your upcoming project after Twilight?
Yes, I can. I came up with this notion called the Showrunners Network, and my idea is that we create 6 series and shoot 6 pilots and take them as a slate of shows to the VOD platforms. And so, because I have so many friends who are showrunners. For those who don't know, a showrunner is a writer-producer who runs a series. Rod Serling was probably the quintessential and original showrunner, but Rockne O'Bannon is certainly that with Farscape and many of the other shows he's created. Gene Roddenberry certainly was that, and so forth. So what I've created is a slate of 6 shows with my partners on that. So one of the shows, of course, is Space Command. Another is Sweet Haven, which I'm creating with Rockney O'Bannon, who created Farscape and Defiance and Alien Nation and Sequest and Cult. And he's currently on the show Evil as an executive producer. I'm also creating a project called Fugitive Space with Marc Fergus and Hawk Ostby, who developed for television and ran with Narain Shankar The Expanse. And they also wrote Children of Men and Iron Man. And also we're doing a project called Rod Serling's After Twilight. Now, I'm still securing the agreement to do this because I'm talking to the Serling family and their representative, but of course I know all these people. I've known them forever. But one thing that's bugged me about, well, you know, they've tried to revive Twilight Zone many times, and they keep talking about a revival of Night Gallery, and invariably they're not that great. For instance, when we brought it back in the 80s, I wrote for that show. It was an amazing writing staff: George R.R. Martin, Harlan Ellison, you know, etc., Rockney O'Bannon. But you know, so there were some great episodes, but there wasn't, you know, Serling as a writer. You know, he was a genius. There was no one like him, no one. And he was the Arthur Miller of television. He was our great, gigantically talented writer. But these shows are basically running with his IP, the intellectual properties he created, but not really honoring him as a writer enough, I don't think. And he wrote an enormous amount of material that either never got made, like episodes of Twilight Zone he wrote that were never shot, Night Gallery that were never shot, other projects he wrote that were never shot, and all the live TV stuff he did that hasn't been seen, you know, in over, what, 70 years, something like that. And so my idea, and then, but here's the coolest part. Rod was a mainstream dramatist in the 1950s. He did Playhouse 90 and many other shows, did, you know, Patterns and Requiem for Heavyweight, The Velvet Alley. These were all mainstream. And it was only through censorship that he was forced into writing science fiction so he could write about race and social issues and politics and all the things he wanted to write about that the censors wouldn't let him write about on the other shows. So he created Twilight Zone. And by the time he got to Requiem for Heavyweight in 1957, he was dictating everything he wrote. He would wake up in the morning, lounge by his Olympic-sized pool back of the house in Pacific Palisades, and dictate into a wire recorder and then later a cassette recorder. And then his secretary would type all this stuff up, and then he'd make hand corrections. But that wasn't just scripts he dictated. It was letters, it was speeches, it was shopping lists, it was everything. And Rod had an incredibly distinctive way of talking, so that you can recognize it in his scripts. Everything he said was in that Rod Serling style. And so it was thought that all of these recordings, dictation recordings, were lost, and they just found 1,000 hours of them. And I wanted to do a show that would be narrated by Rod Serling from that material, that would be made up of unmade and unseen Rod Serling scripts, as well as scripts by Matheson, Beaumont, George Clayton Johnson, the great Twilight Zone writers. It's unmade scripts by them, plus scripts by me, by Neil Gaiman, by, you know, whomever. It'd be an anthology show, but Rod would be narrating it. And so I've been talking to the Serling family and the representative, and so far they're very enthusiastic. So we'll see if we can nail that down. But and Joe Dougherty is aboard on that project. He was executive producer on Pretty Little Liars. He wrote a wonderful noir Lovecraft pastiche called Cast a Deadly Spell that's on HBO that you can watch. It's really fun. It's sort of like Raymond Chandler if there were magic in the world. And it's great. And Fred Ward stars in it, also the star of Tremors. So yes, so that's one of the projects that we want to be part of the Showrunners Network. And you know,
I was gonna say I didn't know he was coming on board as your showrunner for that one.
Yes,
because I was thinking almost Rod Serling was your showrunner partner.
Oh. Nope. But Rod Serling is certainly the big name on that project, right? And also Magic Time, the trilogy of novels that I did. That's another one I want to make as part of the Showrunners Network. And you know, so that's the batch. So you know, just, you know, another regular day in my life. So
very cool. Let's go on to another great question from the Eye Creature. What's an obscure sci-fi book that you feel needs more recognition?
That's a very interesting question. Swastika Night is a very interesting book. I just found out about it, and it's really remarkable. I don't, yeah, if I prepared, I would have had. Here we go. Here it is. This is very, very, very interesting. This is a book called Swastika Night. It was written in 1935 and came out in 1937, and it takes place 1,000 years in the future when the Nazis have conquered the world, and it follows what they've done in setting up the Nazi state, the Nazi world, and they're running all of Europe and so forth. This was written in 1935. They'd only been in power 2 years, and it's amazingly prescient about them wiping out the Jews and all sorts of stuff. And it's a fascinating book. And the fun part is it's credited to a writer named Murray Constantine, but it was actually a woman who wrote it, and her name was Catherine Burdekin, and she was this amazingly feminist writer. And I'm reading the book now, but it's really remarkable. So and you can get newer editions. Galant's brought it out recently in England, so you can get it for probably like $5 or $7 online. But I think that's a really interesting book. There's also a book called Black No More, which I think is the first science fiction novel by an African American. It was written in 1930, and it posits a near future where treatment has been developed that can make Black people into white people, and it's about what happens to America when that happens. And it's satirical, and again, you can get newer editions of it. I have the first edition somewhere in here, God knows. And it's just a great book, and very fun and very timely even now. So but that's some of it. Yeah, those are two off the top of my head. I'm sure I could name a lot more if I put my mind to it, but that's a good start. And of course, if you've never read Have Spacesuit Will Travel, it is a delightful book, and by Robert Heinlein, and that I also highly recommend.
Yeah, that Swastika Night one has really big Man in the High Castle vibes.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I'm a big fan of books that are alternative history books about the Nazis winning, because of course I'm Jewish, and had they won, my mom would have been exterminated, as would have my grandfather, grandmother, aunt, everybody. I would never have existed. So it has very solid meaning to me. So I love The Man in the High Castle by Philip K. Dick. I love Fatherland by Robert Harris. There's another book I recently read. It's by Christopher Priest, and it's about an alternative history where because Rudolf Hess was Hitler's second in command as deputy, and he flew to England with a peace offer in 1941, which was turned down. But this book posits what would have happened if they'd accepted, and that's very, very interesting. And again, a very good book, really wonderful. So it's definitely an area of. And another thing that's interesting that most people don't know is Philip K. Dick, A Man in the High Castle, won the Hugo for Best Novel. I think it was of 1960 or 61. But he started work on a sequel, and it was so depressing to him that he only got about 10, 15 pages into it. But that's in print now too, and you can read where the story would have gone from there, which I think they utilized in the TV series Man in the High Castle, which my friend Glenn Mazzara created. But no, fascinating stuff. But this one is definitely amazing, and this was written before World War II. And this is actually the second edition. It was printed during the war, and it just it's just amazing how they got it right in this case. So really cool. So great.
Yeah. We have another question from Bruce Moore.
Sure. Hi, Bruce.
Who says, his screenwriting professor insists on us writing extensive character backgrounds before we start writing. So do you block out the stories first, or do you do bios on all your characters first?
Elaine tends to do bios, and I don't. I generally, or Elaine will sometimes start with the idea, what the theme is of the piece. I never do that. I usually come up with an idea, a notion, some storyline that interests me, or a character that interests me, or a milieu. It can be any which way. As I develop the story, I'll think more about the backstory of the character and their relationships and so forth. Space Command is fun because it covers 150 years, actually 180 years in the lives of these characters. So it's multi-generational. So you get to see someone's kid and their grandkid and their great grandkid, and the ripple effect down the generations, which was of great interest to me. In terms of character bios, I've done it in the past. I don't really enjoy it. It can be useful for some writers. If it's useful for you, do it, because most writers can't write characters that people will care about, and that's the single most important thing to be able to do. So if I one thing I do actually in lieu of that is I often go to people. I often base characters on people I've known, and people like, for instance, if when I wrote a spec homicide script for homicide, I actually went and hung out with LAPD homicide officers and hung out with them for a couple days. And so I asked a bunch of questions. So you get the reality of that world. I would never just kind of imagine it. You always have to really research what you're doing. And I think that's very, very important, because there's a whole way of thinking and a way of talking and a way of being from numerous professions. That's where I think a lot of science fiction movies and TV shows get it wrong in how they write astronauts, because they'll often be kind of depressed and it's dreary. No, all of the space scientists I've ever met have been enormously enthusiastic about what they're doing, and the only science fiction movie of that's really nailed that is The Martian, which really does capture that thrill of exploration. And The Martian is one of my favorite books and movies.
Great. Let's see. Next, another Bruce Moore question. Just keep firing them away, Bruce. These are great. What are your thoughts on the Twilight Zone episode, I Am the Night, Color Me Black?
I find it a little talky and didactic, but it still has power nevertheless. I much prefer The Big Tall Wish as an episode dealing with, or not dealing with, race, because it's just about Black characters living their lives. I think that's a brilliant piece of work. But I Am the Night, Covering Me Black, it has a great performance by Ivan Dixon, who was regular on Hogan's Heroes. It's powerful, but and I haven't watched it since the Black Lives Matter movement has risen, so I should probably take another look at it. One thing I'm thinking of doing, because I want to raise about $100,000 or more to give to Elaine on one of her projects, because she's been working on my stuff, God knows. I thought, well, how can I raise about $100,000 or more? And one thing I haven't yet done, which I will do in the very near future, so watch this space. When I produced the Twilight Zone Blu-ray, I did 52 episode commentaries, and that was great fun. I did them with Neil Gaiman and George Clayton Johnson and Matheson, Richard Donner, on and on. But that still leaves 104 episodes. So I'm going to do a campaign where I will do the other 104 commentaries on the Twilight Zone, 104 episodes. And so there will be incredible perks. You can either get all 104 episodes on audio. You can get an episode dedicated to you. You can get your questions answered in the commentary about your favorite episode. And for the top rung, which should be, I think, $1,000, you get to do the audio commentary with me. So on your favorite episode. So watch this space. We'll be launching that in the near future, but it's going to be pretty fun, because again, I am the world's expert on the Twilight Zone. I met all these people when they were still with us, and I know a ton of this stuff. And so it's very important, I think, that this information be shared with the world. So I'll be happy to do that, and it'll be interesting to do all of them. I'd rather like that. Come back to me after I've done them and see if I still like it, because there's certain episodes that come wander with me that's going to be an interesting one to talk about, because that one's doesn't make much sense really, but even so.
Great. Our next question is from Joseph.
Great.
Who says, I'm sure you're busy with Space Command, but I wanted to know if your great history of sci-fi film series, which is now up to the 80s, will be continuing anytime soon.
Yes, it will. And I've been thinking about it, because the 80s, I personally think that the 80s and the 90s were the great golden age of science fiction film. I mean, there were great films like 2001, which I love. And of course, the 70s had Star Wars, which was a landmark film. But just in terms of the sheer number of great science fiction and fantasy films, my God, in the 80s and 90s, you've got, well, you name it, Blade Runner, Alien. Well, Alien was 79, but Aliens was, I think 82. And Wrath of Khan, The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, E.T., on and on. I mean, it's just a spectacular 20 years. And so I'm very eager to get to it, and I will. It's funny, because I, of course, wrote science fiction television in the 80s and 90s. So I was there for a lot of that as a participant. But in terms of the films, I knew a lot of the people making those films, and they formed a huge impact on me. For instance, when I created Captain Power, when I developed that for television, Captain Power was very, very strongly informed by Aliens, first of all, and also, of course, by one of my favorite comic books, Magnus Robot Fighter, and so that was, it had a lot of influence on how I went about creating some of the things I created. So yeah, we'll definitely get to that. And then once we do the history of science fiction film, then we'll do the history of science fiction television, and then finally we'll do the history of science fiction comic books. And because the fascinating thing is, in the 30s and 40s, a lot of origin stories for superheroes were magical, right? By the time you got to the 50s and 60s, the Silver Age, a lot of them were scientific. For instance, most of the Marvel characters got their powers through radiation, either being bitten by a radioactive spider or being at the side of a bomb test like the Hulk. One of the few who didn't get it that way was, Thor, who's a mythical god, go figure. But the Flash, the Green Lantern, Superman, these are all great science fictional characters. And so, and then of course you have Weird Science and EC in the 50s, and you've got, as I said, Magnus Robot Fighter. I mean, there's a lot to talk about. And so, so we'll definitely get into all that stuff. So yes, it is something I plan to do soon in my copious free time.
We have another question from Arkansas Big Dog Hensley.
Yes.
Who says, I watched a movie last night, which turns out was AE Apocalypse Earth, and they had a ripoff of Data. What do you think of people using homages or ripoffs, of characters like that?
I think you should be very, very, very careful. I think there are far more ripoffs than honest homages. Like, for instance, one thing I just did in Space Command is, I'll have little tips of the hat to science, the history of science fiction, that if you're looking, you say, oh, wait a minute, that's really fun, that's cool, but in terms of characters and story, I'm not ripping off other science fiction things. And you have to be very careful with dialogue too. I mean, so many times I've heard, no offense, none taken, which is, the line from, Aliens, or game over, man, game over, which is Aliens. When you, by the way, if you ever watch Aliens again, which I highly recommend you do, notice that every single line that Bill Paxton has works. Every single one of them. Oh man, I was short. We're fucked. Like, what are we gonna do now? Well, we can. It's just smoking or non-smoking, and that's funny because that's a reference to when he's looking at the plans of the facility. Back in the days when you had smoking on airplanes, they would ask you if you wanted a smoking or non-smoking seat. They don't do that anymore because they can't smoke on an airplane. But that's that joke, and it's a good joke, So it's a great movie. But yeah, but I think I like to be inspired by things, but I do not want to just be ripping them off, because what's the point? Why do that?
Right. Let's go to Luke Herbert with his question. What has been your favorite episode of the new Twilight Zone reboot?
I watched the first season. I haven't watched the second. The one that had a kid voted as president was sort of a commentary on Trump. It was heavy-handed, but I found it rather entertaining. Most of them I found heavy-handed and obvious and not well-crafted particularly. I wasn't a fan of that show. So I mean, eventually I'll probably watch the rest of them, but for me, I'd rather just watch an episode of The Prisoner or the original Outer Limits or something for entertainment sake, And again, the harder I work, the less inclined I am to catch up on stuff I don't really want to watch much, So that's why I haven't. I mean, and even in some cases, even stuff that I would like to watch, but again, it's like, we're putting in pretty long days here between all the projects I'm working on. And so I would rather, I was saying to Elaine the other day, with us in our life, it's a choice of watching a show or making a show, and so it's like, but yes, I mean, I still have to get to The Mandalorian, still have to get to the later seasons of The Orville. I haven't finished season 3 of Discovery yet, haven't watched Lower Decks, so the one thing I should say that's very fun to me, when they debut Strange New Worlds, I certainly hope it says created by Gene Roddenberry, but that will be the first case of a show that was pitched and the pilot was shot in 1964 and it was picked up in 2021. I think that's just great that the original version of Star Trek will now be a series.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's just so cool. And you know, so I'm wishing them all good things. So yeah, so any other questions, Adam?
Yeah. Lower Decks was really good, by the way. I saw
Yes,
that.
I've heard that.
In my opinion, but I
Sure.
like cartoons.
That's fine.
Let's see, next one. The Eye Creature asks, what is your opinion on the 80s Twilight Zone series and the movie?
On the 80s Twilight Zone series, I worked on it. The script I wrote was pulled by the censors a week before prep as being too hard-edged. It's called Knife Through the Veil. I want someday to shoot that script. Katie Sackhoff wanted to be in it, in the lead, some years after that when I was going to make it. It had an amazing writing staff, as I said, Harlan Ellison, Rockne O'Bannon, George R.R. Martin, Alan Brennert. So it was a very, very good effort, but it was spotty. So you might have an episode like Paladin of the Lost Hour by Harlan, which was very, very good, or you know, her I can't remember the title off the top of my head of the one that Alan Brennert did, her Fugitive Soul, something like that. But you know, there were good individual episodes, but there were also a lot of misfires. And you know, although the original Twilight Zone had some bum episodes too, the batting average I think was higher. And so it was a good effort, and everyone loved Twilight Zone, and there was a lot of talent there, but it was very hit and miss. And but of all the remakes of the Twilight Zone, that's the one I thought came closest to being of the quality it should have been. In terms of the movie, it was terrible that Vic Morrow and 2 children died in the making of it. No film should ever kill anybody, ever. But certainly Nightmare at 20,000 Feet by George Miller is a lot of fun, though I prefer the original Shatner episode because it has more of a heart. But I liked that very much. I thought Kick the Can was kind of funky, though I was sort of responsible for that episode being the one that Spielberg chose, because at one point I was sort of a consultant on that film, and at one point I was told that Steven Spielberg was trying to figure out which episode he was going to remake for his. And they said, well, he's watching The Trade-Ins, which is about 2 old people who can get younger bodies and so forth. And I said, well, why is he watching that one? And they said, well, because he wants to do something about old age. And I said, well, has he watched Kick the Can? And he said, well, he sort of rejected it, and I said, well, has he watched it recently? And he said, no. So I drove home and got my VHS tape of that episode, and I said he should watch it. And then he decided to do Kick the Can. So the good part was that George Clayton Johnson, who wrote the original script of that, that the money from that allowed him, from Spielberg doing it, allowed him to pay off his house, which was terrific. I met Scatman Crothers there. He was a really nice guy, but again, I felt, and the ending George came up with for that was kind of interesting. But again, the original is such a gem, you know, that the remake doesn't just as. Same with It's a Good Life. I mean, Joe Dante did some interesting stuff with his remake, but it doesn't hold a candle to the original that Serling adapted from Jerome Bixby's short story. So, you know, but I think the Twilight Zone movie, my favorite of all of the stories they did would definitely be Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, just because it had such a incredible pace and style, you know. So yeah.
Great. Our next question is from someone I'm sure neither of us knows at all. Some person named Edison Edits. I don't.
I can guess who that is.
Yeah. How about those audio broadcasts from Mars? Did you ever think you'd hear sounds from another planet?
Well, I love that helicopter. I got to tell you, I mean, it's just amazing. And I'm so eager for people to land there, you know. But the one thing that this new mission shows is the desolation of that planet. It really is going to be extremely difficult to survive on Mars. It's basically the equivalent to being like underwater. You know, I mean, it's like you can't go outside without air, and plus it has radiation. You know, it's like it's more dangerous than any environment on Earth, anywhere on Earth. But that said,
and it's super cold too, so you need heat as well. Yeah.
But the interesting thing is the temperature range at the equator. There are some days that are 75 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's like a regular day here. But I think my personal opinion is there are ways to get around all of that. For instance, I think setting up habitats in caves is a great idea because it shields you from the radiation. It shields you from small micrometeorites or anything like that. I think that's the way to go, really. And also because the cave is already built, so you don't have to, it's not as hard to build an airtight environment. But that said, I'm thrilled what Elon Musk is doing. I have a little copy. Let's see, it's right over here. I have my own little model of his starship. Look at that. And the fun part is I never in my wildest dreams thought that anyone would ever build. I mean, here, you get a load of this. This is the spaceship from When Worlds Collide. And this is Elon Musk's. Let's see if I can get them to kind of be equivalent sizes. And you can see, it's the same idea. And so, 3 cheers for Elon, it's incredible. And so I'm really rooting for him. He's one of my heroes, despite his idiosyncrasies as a person.
Right. Very cool. Next question, another one from the Eye Creature. Were you aware of the canceled Alien cartoon series from the 80s?
No, I'd love to have seen anything they did of that. If you have a link to any of the material from that, I was not aware of it, but I'd be very interested in seeing it. The one thing I will say about Alien, because it is one of my favorite films, as is Aliens, when I saw it, first of all, the first I ever got an inkling of it at all is when I met Ron Cobb when I was 16, and he took me and showed me the 10 paintings he'd just completed, concept paintings that sold Alien some years later, and they were spectacular. But with Alien, I was at the World Science Fiction Convention in Los Angeles, and they had arranged a special screening of a movie that was coming out called Alien, and none of us knew anything about it. We had no idea what it was. And so when that movie started, it was so creepy. And when that chest burster burst out of John Hurt's chest, everyone jumped a foot, including Harlan Ellison, who was sitting in a row in front of me. And it just blew us away. It was unlike any film that had ever been made before it, and just phenomenal. And so I'm a big fan of Ridley Scott, of course, but also of Dan O'Bannon, who co-wrote it with Ron Shusett and Ron Cobb, who was one of the designers, and of course H.R. Giger, who designed the Alien and the Alien ship and all that. Some people don't know that Ron Shusett, who co-wrote Alien with Dan O'Bannon and also did Total Recall with him, was the brother of Gary Shusett, who ran Sherwood Oaks College here in LA. And Gary was a dear friend and often came to my table meetings, and he's really missed as well. And that's one of the bummers of having friends over many years, is that you lose them and then you just have to, remember them. But he certainly was a great friend and helper. And I met his brother as well, Ron. And and Dan O'Bannon, by the way, is someone I very much want to be part of the Showrunners Network at some point. I have some of his unmade projects that I've read through, and they're very interesting. So we'll see where that leads. I've been talking to his widow about that.
Very cool. Next question is from Ann Daly.
Hi, Ann.
Who asks, where does Space Command sit in the timeline of all science fiction?
Yes. Space Command, the prequel, starts 30 years from now. And the pilot starts 60 years from now, and then covers 150 years from that point. So it's basically about the colonization of the solar system and exploitation of the solar system. And then we develop the faster than light drive, and we jump out to other star systems. So in that way, it's analogous, I guess, to The Expanse in sort of the ground it covers. But it's a much longer timeline, because The Expanse only covers, The Expanse, the first, I think, 7 novels take place in a fairly short number of years, and then it jumps 20 years later, something like that. And but from the beginning, I always designed Space Command as being multi-generational.
Very cool. Next, Bruce Moore asks, where do you get all your energy? Do you ever sleep?
Yes, I do, every now and then. I think I've always been fairly energetic, and the good part is I've calmed down over the years, so I don't have anxiety the way I did when I was younger. The great part about when you're older and you've accomplished a fair amount of your dreams, that you aren't so worried about that pressure of, will I make it? Will I succeed? You already have. And so that takes a lot of pressure off, because now it's just about, what do I want to do? What do I want to make? And fortunately, both Elaine and I wake up each day with enthusiasm for creating things, for making things that are meaningful to us. And we're very well matched. And so a lot of my enthusiasm and energy comes from just the fact that I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing and having a great time of it. I mean, I don't mind working hard ever. So I'm just thrilled to be doing all this stuff. It's funny, you know, the reason I write books as well as, you know, TV and movies and the other things is because my heroes growing up were people like Rod Serling and Ray Bradbury, who did books and TV shows and movies. And so that seemed just like second nature to me. And I remember years ago, my book agent, I said, I think it was Magic Time. I said, I want there to be audiobooks of Magic Time as well as the published physical books. He said, why would you want that? And I said, because then the book will be in two different sections of the bookstore. You know, it's like, you know, it was like obvious to me why you would do these things. Ray Bradbury told me something very interesting years ago. When he wrote Moby Dick and it was a success, the John Huston movie, he got a lot of offers to write movies and he turned them all down. And he said to me, I turned them down because I wanted to be famous and nobody knew who screenwriters were. And so he knew that writing books, he could build himself as a brand, that he would be well known. Whereas if he was writing movies, and it's true, it's absolutely true. I mean, some of us can name movie writers, but most of us can't, you know, except for the writer directors like James Cameron or Guillermo, you know. But it was the great fun of being friends and mentored by such amazing talents is that they'll tell you stuff in private that they don't necessarily tell the world. And because obviously Ray might not have said that, you know, speaking to an audience, because it might have made him sound egotistical. But to me, I didn't see it as egotistical at all. I saw it as very, very, very clever and self-knowing, you know. So that was great. That was great.
Awesome. Next question is from Monster Vision. I'm sorry, I just can't say it any other way than Monster Vision.
Nor should you.
Right. The question is, do you think that the 2002 Twilight Zone is better than the current version?
I don't know. Again, I'd have to go back and watch it. The weird thing was Forrest Whitaker narrating it. It was like, well, okay, I like Forrest Whitaker. Why is he there? What's he doing there? You know, it was kind of odd. You know, the funny part is there've been a number of Twilight Zone-like shows, and I actually wrote for a number of them. One of the ones I wrote for that was sort of the most humorous was a show called The Watcher that I think was on the WB, and it was like a Twilight Zone kind of show set in Vegas, and the host was Sir Mix-a-Lot. So, so that's something that most people don't know, that I've actually written for Sir Mix-a-Lot, you know, and I'm a big fan, you know, Baby's Got Back, you know, and but that was, I actually wrote words that Sir Mix-a-Lot actually said on camera. And sometime I should actually write down the actors I've written for, because there would definitely be surprises, definitely be surprises. And, yeah. You know, so, I mean, Paul Winchell, I wrote for Paul Winchell when he played Gargamel on Smurfs. I wrote for Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was in Liberty's Kids as one of the voices, and for Walter Cronkite, you know, and so, you know, it's just fascinating who you run across.
I have Arnold's signature on my diploma because he was governor when I graduated college.
That's fun. That's very fun. Well, I met him once, and I said, I wrote for you. And he said, oh, really? What did you write? This is when he was governor. And I said, well, I wrote, you know, Baron von Steuben on Liberty's Kids. I didn't tell him, however, that Baron von Steuben was actually gay. You know, I thought that would be like rubbing salt in the wound. But it was, you know, it was a very fun show. Elaine and I were very, very proud that we wrote for that. We wrote multiple episodes. That was another show where they wanted me to story edit, and I said no, because that's a full-time job, and I liked the show, but not well enough to commit, you know, myself for a couple of years nonstop, you know, to it.
Okay. Another question from Bruce Moore. Have you seen Christopher Plummer's movie Remember? I honestly didn't see the ending coming, which was refreshing.
I haven't seen that one. Christopher Plummer was a good actor. He got better as he got older. My friend Doug Hayes, who was a director on The Twilight Zone, told me that he once read, because in his youth, Christopher Plummer could be extremely over the top. And Doug told me he'd once read a review of Christopher Plummer saying, it said, last night at such and such production on the Broadway stage, Christopher Plummer acted the other actors off the stage. He also acted the scenery off the stage, and at last sight, the stagehands were running for their lives. Good.
Great.
Yeah. Really.
Our next question is from Movie World Comics.
Great.
Who asks, who is a writer that you would love to collaborate with that you have not already collaborated with?
That's really interesting. I think Neil Gaiman would be fun to collaborate with. He's so inventive and talented. I wanted to collaborate with Harlan Ellison, but of course, sadly, we lost Harlan. He's someone I would have approached for the Showrunners Network if I'd had the chance. And I mean, Harlan was a very, very, very fiery person, but just really, really an interesting man and a great inspiration. Beyond that, it's Andy Weir might be fun to collaborate, the author of The Martian. I mean, right now, I mean, I'm collaborating with so many of people. I've reached out to Ron Moore. We'll see if we end up working together. I've been in communication with Neil Gaiman about being part of the Showrunners Network. Sometimes it depends on what deals they have with studios, because sometimes they're on exclusives where they can't do those things, you know. And but Ron Moore, I'd like to collaborate with. George R.R. Martin, there's a project of his I'd like to work with him on. There's a batch, you know. But the funny thing is, you have to be careful who you collaborate with, because it isn't just talent that you need for your partner to have, but you have to have sort of a similar aesthetic where at least you can meet in the middle. Because George Martin, you know, he's very dark vision, you know, I mean, you know, Game of Thrones, but certainly working with Rockne O'Bannon on creating Sweet Haven has been great fun. And we've been friends for decades, you know, since the new Twilight Zone. And, you know, so that's been just pure joy. And I'm having a great time with Mark Fergus as well, and Joe Dougherty as well. So, you know, no complaints.
Great. Moving on to the next question, another one from the Eye Creature. How about some old Mexican sci-fi films? Have you seen Ship of Monsters?
No.
La Nave de los Monstros.
It's a great title. It's a great title. And one thing, just getting back to collaboration, I actually did collaborate with Ray Bradbury on a project that we called Lost Mars. And it was made up of 22 Mars stories that he wrote that were not in the Martian Chronicles, but were on his version of Mars. And I proposed it as a miniseries, and I actually outlined it, and Ray gave me the rights to take it out when he was still with us. And sadly, that didn't sell, but it's something I still plan to do once we get the Showrunners Network up and running. And, you know, so we'll see. I just learned that the director of Guardians of the Galaxy is doing Martian Chronicles. We'll see if he does it right or if he fucks it up. So excuse my language for those who are like of delicate sensibilities. But I mean, he's a good director. I don't know if he can pull it off. I mean, certainly the miniseries of Martian Chronicles that was done in the 70s or 80s was really poor, and that was Richard Matheson scripted it, but it was just not good. There were a few little bright spots, but it wasn't magical. It wasn't poetical as it should have been. The Martian Chronicles is one of my favorite books, and it takes a very specific handling. But Lost Mars, Michael Ninkin was going to direct it and produce it with me, and I was going to write it. Michael Ninkin was one of the great directors on Battlestar Galactica, and then he went on to Defiance and The Good Lord Bird for you know, with Ethan Hawke, and so he would have been, you know, the right guy to do it with me. And I approached Ian McCaig to design it, which would have been, again, phenomenal. You know, my friend Ian designed Star Wars and tons of other things. So, and
Space Command too.
Yes, and Space Command, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the more common perks that you can get on the Kickstarter.
Ian McCaig's designs for Space Command, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, we should mention there's a Kickstarter campaign going on now, spacecommandkickstarter.com. Please go there and pledge. You know, it will allow us to finish the second hour and ship out the Blu-rays and the DVDs and roll camera on the next episode. So it's really vital that we succeed and get to the finish line. I'm very
and there's lots of great perk levels you can choose from, including the create your own perk package, which I'm very excited about, because there's so many different add-ons. There's the dollar level is called the create your own perk package. So you get that for $1, and then you can add on whatever perks you want. You can make your own package, which
That's
is really
great.
cool. So let's go to our next question, which is, here we go, another one from Movie World Comics.
Mhm.
And they ask, who is your favorite Universal monster?
Frankenstein, the Karloff Frankenstein. It was just that quality of sensitivity, that quality of pathos.
Not the young Frankenstein.
Certainly not.
Putting on the Ritz!
I mean, I think Karloff's Frankenstein is just a revelation. He's Guillermo del Toro's favorite monster as well, and it's I love Karloff's rendition of that. But the Wolfman is fun, and Dracula, the Lugosi Dracula is good, and the creature from that Black Lagoon. I mean, they really had a way with that stuff, but Frankenstein stands above all of them, I think.
And I mean, it was the first sci-fi story out.
Some people dispute that, but Mary Shelley's Frankenstein really has a good position as probably the first science fiction novel, because it was, and the definition is a science fiction novel is a novel where technology is what determines the magical element, so that's the whole gag. So yeah, great.
Let's see. Oh, here we go. Vena P says, it's so great what you've done with the worldwide talent searches for Space Command. What was the casting process on your end for those?
Basically, like for instance, when we did it for Ethan, for Captain Kemmer, and for Lieutenant Bradbury, we put out the word. We got 7,000 inquiries. We got 1,200 videos. So we had a team that first winnowed them down. So like I didn't have to watch the naked auditions, for instance, which we got. And, so they winnowed it down to about 200, which Elaine and I then watched. And then we had callbacks of about 40 people. And we didn't cast just 2 actors. We cast Ethan McDowell from that, Brian McClure, Sarah Marafino, Aaron Gaffey, Coley, Mustafa Speak. I mean, we ultimately ended up, I think, casting 9 actors in a variety of roles. So, and then we did the talent search again for our bonus episode, and we've done it now for The Prophet, for Forgiveness. But it's time intensive and labor intensive, but I really love the idea of giving someone a chance that wouldn't otherwise have one. And I don't regret at all the people we've cast from the talent searches. They've been a blessing to us. So, and
many have gone on to do other things. Like
well, Ethan's in Doom Patrol, and Christina Moses, we cast in World Enough and Time, the George Takei Star Trek episode. She's now the lead in A Million Little Things, and prior to us, she had never done television. So, so that was a real discovery.
Very cool. Let's go to another question from Bruce Moore, who says, I love the Space Command poster.
Thanks.
As you can see behind me. Who did the artwork?
It's a great question. There's a spectacularly talented man named Jeffrey Hayes, and he's done a number of our posters. I met him when I did World Enough in Time, the Star Trek New Voyages episode with George Takei. He was the on-set photographer, and then he was the poster artist, and he did a great poster for that. So it was only natural that I would reach out to him when we did Space Command. Sadly, he's now departed. He retired as a deputy chief of police in Texas, and he's now going to film school. So he's not available to do our posters anymore. But I just love his work. It's just gorgeous, just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's very visually appealing.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we don't have any new questions.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, it is getting a little late. We've been doing this for almost 2 hours now.
Yeah, no, I was younger when I started. It's like someone will have to carry me out.
I was clean shaven when we started this.
You were, and you hadn't gone through puberty. So this has been great, guys. We'll call it a day at the moment. But go to our Kickstarter campaign, send whatever money you can. If you haven't seen the first hour of Space Command, I just posted it here on Mr. Sci-Fi, and we're about to have a sneak preview of the next 10 minutes of part 2. So that'll be in the next day or two.
Let's do one more question.
You bet.
and then we'll close it out.
Absolutely.
Because it's appropriate.
Yeah.
The eye creature wants to know, what was the hardest part about doing Space Command?
The hardest part, raising money is an ongoing challenge. So when we ultimately sell the show to a buyer, that'll help a lot, because I won't have to be, going pillar to post. Visual effects has been the most challenging beyond that, simply because there's 1,800 visual effects shots, and what I can afford to pay, I have to have high quality, but it can't break the bank. So it's taken a lot of ingenuity to pull it off, because my whole idea was to do something that I would love and that my audience would love. But so the length of time it's taken to do stuff has been a little frustrating, but I don't regret a single moment of it. I mean, it's been challenging, but it hasn't been unpleasant. It's been extremely fun. And I'm very glad that my audience trusts me enough to give me the money to make this. And, it's like, I think about the character in Kick the Can who says, I can't play Kick the Can alone. And so his friends have to come and help him for the magic to happen. And I feel very much like that myself. And so the great thing about having to raise the money, having to reach out to my audience, is that my audience came through and is continuing to come through. So I love that. I love the dialogue with you guys, the fact that we can have a dialogue. And, one of my favorite things is, now that I do Mr. Sci-Fi, people recognize me here and in England and all over the place. And so I was walking my dogs a few months ago, and I live in a neighborhood in West Hollywood that's a mixture of gay people and Ukrainians and Russians and so forth. And so across the street, I was walking my dogs, and across the street, there's this very heavyset, older Russian man, and they kind of walk laterally as they walk, with his wife, who was shaped like him, sort of a refrigerator with a head, and his two little kids, who were like mini fridges with heads. And suddenly he saw me, and he yelled across the street, said, "Mr. Sci-Fi, I love your commentaries, especially Star Trek." I said, "Thank you." And so, so you never know who's going to be a fan, and that was wonderful. And so, to all of you, I wanted to thank you for spending the time with us, and for all of the ways you've helped me and made my life worth living. And we'll see you again real soon. We also do this kind of thing on Thursday nights when we have a simulcast with my roundtable. So that starts at 5:30 Pacific time every Thursday, for now, at least. Yeah. And I'll be posting Mr. Sci-Fi videos pretty much every day for the next few weeks during our campaign. So thanks, Adam, as always, for doing this so well. And we'll see you all very, very soon. And thanks everyone for being there. Take care, Adam.
Yep. Okay. Always happy to help. All right. And thank you out there, Mr. Sci-Fi. We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
If you want to join us.
More fun
at 5:30.
Yes.
PM Pacific time.
That'll be great. Thanks, guys.